I'm Dr. Eric Jolly, the President and CEO of the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundations, a lifelong educator and science education advocate, and it is my pleasure to welcome not just this panel, but all of you here today. One first step towards justice is the courageous recognition of injustice. The superintendents and the 3,000 partners, the teachers, the students, and all of you are a part of that first step. We are recognizing the injustice, and when you read this report, it is clear that where we need to find the fix is not by fixing the students, but by changing the patterns of the adults who help nurture and grow those students. So we have the first step. We have recognized the injustice. The next question is, how will we act to fix it? And today we are blessed with a panel that helped build this report, and I'm pleased to introduce them. Dr. John Schultz is the superintendent of Edina Public School District since 2017. He has been a middle school science teacher and associate principal at Eden Prairie. He's also taught science education and elementary teaching methods at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Schultz earned a master's degree in soil, water, and climate science and a PhD in curriculum and instruction from the University of Minnesota. Dr. Carlton Jenkins has served as superintendent of the Robbinsdale area district school since 2015. And Dr. Jenkins came to Robbinsdale from the Atlanta Public Schools, where he served as the chief academic officer. He's also previously been superintendent of Saginaw Public Schools in Michigan and has led multiple education programs across the Midwest, starting as Beloit Public Schools in Wisconsin as a high school principal. Dr. Jenkins began his career in Beloit in the late 80s. He earned a master's degree in educational administration and a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Schultz, Dr. Jenkins, you've had a chance to read this report. You helped build the Reimagine report. Do you have a question for Dr. Rodriguez or a reaction that you'd like to share as we get started? And I think you may be seated upon a microphone somewhere. If not, we'll pass one down. You're seated upon there. I stole yours. Oh, you stole it.
Testing. Should I start?
Yes.
So, Dr. Rodriguez, throughout the report, there's an emphasis on student agency and student voice. And you also mentioned that in your remarks. This is central to the discussions the superintendents had when they were developing the Reimagine Minnesota recommendations. And we all believe in education that through this we can build trust with students, especially for those students who have been alienated from their school experiences. The report suggests that students be given the opportunity to imagine, to hypothesize, investigate, and really having students partner in co-constructing knowledge in learning. So I believe many teachers do this, and many want to make this more central in their work. So my question lies in the current climate of testing and measurement. In the work of measuring achievement against academic standards, what guidance can you give school districts who want to co-construct their learning experiences with students' voice and agency, but are still required to put in place and assess achievement against state standards?
My real interest in assessment is classroom assessment, the kinds of assessment activities that teachers create for their students within the classroom, because that is the most intimate dialogue about a subject matter that teachers engage in with students. And when those assessments allow students to bring in their own experiences and relevance to the subject matter, that's where students really flourish. Kids are scientists, naturally. They are engaged in trial and error on a regular basis. They're experimenting all the time, right? We should capture and harness that. There are lots of examples of how to make the work of a subject matter specialist, a teacher, relevant and engaging for students. I'll give you a quick science example. We can ask students to go take pictures in their home and community about how they keep their family and community safe. Those pictures can be brought in, and we can explore around microbes and microbiology, the science of how we keep our families and communities safe. Thus, just doing a really simple connection with something that matters and something that's relevant, but perhaps something that's unique to each student. Students should be partners, and I mentioned this earlier. When I talk with schools around educational equity, one of the first questions I ask is, have you talked with your students? And I think we can do much, much more of that, and not just talk and listen, but elevate their presence as partners.
Dr. Jenkins, do you have a response or question?
Yes, a question really, first of all, let me just say I am very pleased to be here, and Dr. Rodriguez to be here, and knowing you as a scholar is just really exciting for me to be here. But it should not be, even in any conference, that we recognize Dr. Rodriguez as an exception to the rule. And this is where we have to start this conversation. When is it going to get to the point when we come out, it is because the way we should be, not an exception. There's nothing exceptional about myself or Dr. Rodriguez. But having read through the report and having participated in Reimagine Minnesota's work and looking at the strategies that we put forth, and then looking at the recent development of Cruz Guzman and some of the remedies posed there by the plaintiffs, I am wanting to know from yourself, how do you think this aligns with the Green 6 conditions, which we all know, and as we said here, this work that we're doing now didn't just start. And we can go back to Brown versus the board, but after Brown versus the board, the Green 6, which stands out as the gold standard for segregation and what should be done. So how do you see these three pillars coming together, this report, Reimagine, and then also what we have in the Cruz Guzman?
So this, I mean, wow. That, that is really bringing it all together. And that's a really good question for the tables and for all of us. We should all take that question back and address that actively. You're right, this story has been told for decades. And one of the real challenges, though, is that our communities are continually changing and evolving. And we need to continually recognize that we're all engaged in learning organizations. It's not just that schools are in the business of learning. The school itself and the community itself is a learning organization. We are continually learning how to do schooling. And we can't do that alone, as I mentioned earlier. But we also need to engage and to actively manage that effort. I think far too often we have all these reports generated, and then we have a conference and we're all sort of motivated, and then it gets put away. We need to make that commitment to actively manage this work.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Dr. Schultz, the U of M report and the Reimagine report talks about how the school leaders, the teachers, the people who are in school, how they must develop a level of self-reflection, critical cultural consciousness, and orienting towards the students and their family needs. You started this report several years ago. How has Edina Public Schools wrestled with this challenge in your growing diversity?
So when I started in Edina, I entered into a community that I was just excited to be there. I'm still excited to be there because they are, what Dr. Rodriguez just said, in a conversation about their schools. The community is there. It's every student. The expectation is that every student is engaged in their classrooms. There's an expectation that every student is engaged in their interests. Their student and their families are partners in the schools. And there are broader community partners that come into that conversation and support every student that comes into those buildings. And it is exciting to be in those conversations and be a leader for education. In our learning environments, we are working very hard in the restorative practices and discipline. We're working hard to build those inclusive communities in all of our classrooms where teachers have an understanding of who their students are, creating partnership with their students. Family and community engagement. You heard two of our students talk about the Mosaic group that has conversations about the cultures that are in the Edina Public Schools. One of the greatest images I have is in our lobby outside of our boardroom. We had a multilingual evening where we had parents come in, and what was so fun was all the parents were around the technology people watching how to use our Chromebooks and asking questions and learning how to access their students' work and their curriculum. The curriculum that we are promoting and using in Edina, we're asking the question in our curriculum specifically who benefits from the depiction of the history that our curriculum is teaching, and also asking the questions whose voice is missing in that depiction. Our teachers, we have coaches and groups that learn about the cultural and linguistic approaches to teaching that gives teachers the language and the methods to frame their instruction and curriculum. And we also give teachers technology to house data and information about their students so that, as Dr. Rodriguez mentioned earlier, we can have partners with our students and know who our students are. Our leaders are working hard in understanding their own leadership through different inventories, setting goals around intercultural development. And we also work real hard to question our implicit biases and challenge one another. So it's exciting to have Reimagine Minnesota's recommendations and see them become alive in a school system. And in Edina, those conversations continue, they're expected, and it's just fun to watch this unfold.
Thank you. What I appreciate is how it shows that we can put this report to work and actually have outcomes. The interesting thing for me, one of the interesting things for me in this report was a shift from a concentration on equity of opportunity to a focus on equity of outcome. You know, when we talk about, and doing it through serving the student in their needs. You know, when we talk about equity of opportunity, imagine giving us two children, one of whom is a little malnourished and underfed, and one who's a little portly, and we give each child the same meal because same is equal and equal is same. But if instead we give each child what they need that responds to how they came to us, we'll return to you two healthy children. And that's what that equity of outcome is about. And this report does something really remarkable that I've seen tried in other places. In New Mexico 25 years ago, there was an effort in a bill to say that you could not accredit a school if you could predict graduation rates by race or gender. And then one of the legislators read the report and it didn't pass. Here we're reading the report and writing it. Dr. Schultz, how do you react to the notion that we're going to work to ensure that you cannot predict how well a child performs based on her race, poverty, status, or zip code? What does results neutrality mean to you, and how do you react to it?
First of all, I like the way that you depicted that, in particular when it came to equity. And initially, you were talking about what's equal for everyone. There's a large misperception of what does equity mean, and I do think that we need to have that at our tabletop discussions, because often when you mention things like equity or you mention things of cultural competence, individuals go straight to race. And I'm here to tell you that you can talk about race and not be racist, okay? But there are racist implications and systemic racism. When it's there, you have to call it out. And not calling it out is a problem, okay? But there's a historical context. Even when Dr. King came here, 1963 and 1967, right at the height, right, of the civil rights movement. And we have to think about things in ways of what was going on then. I think as we began to talk about the issues of what's going on in our society, particularly as we're here today, wrestling with the educational issues and thinking about neutrality as is espoused by many, we have to go back and look simply. Myself, we have to talk about vision. We have to put the vision out there. What does it mean to have a real serious vision? What does it mean to talk about our current reality? What does it mean to talk about policy and practice? And the reason we have to talk about vision, because vision when? Now or then? Because as the Constitution was constructed, it had a vision, but did that vision clearly articulate access for everyone? And when we talked about the Declaration of Independence, and the Declaration as it was laid out at that particular time in history, understanding the vision may have been beautiful for those who wrote it, but at that same time, there were individuals, African Americans in bondage, there were women without the rights to vote, individuals could not have property. If I were a white male and did not own property, I did not have the same access. And access itself leads to inadequateness amongst individuals who have access to the funding. So that leads us to our school system. And when we think about the reality now of where we are, and if we don't set policies that clearly articulate funding resources based upon who we have now, then we're going to continue to have inadequate funding. There are some realities between the Metro District, as pointed out by Dr. Alexander from the U, that talked about in the Metro, there's a 20 to 30% cost differential in the Metro just because of the labor costs. And if we get $1 in the Metro and you get $1, I'm going to say in some other place, that dollar in the Metro is like 70 cents versus the dollar that's really going to the rural. Then there's another issue that we haven't addressed. I think the legislators have tried to, but trying is really not going to get it. We're fundamentally flawed in that area. What we don't recognize the differences. We have a huge socio-emotional issue occurring right now, not just in our area, but throughout the nation. We have at-risk factors when you have a urban-suburban district, and you look right at Robbinsdale. We are that district that represent Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnetonka, all of them. And when you go to fund that district, you have to look at some of the causations as to how you're trying to educate all children, and it's clearly stated that all of us have these inalienable rights, okay? Well, you're taking away the rights if you're underfunding the school system. And I think right now, to get to neutrality, we have to go back and say, what are the real needs to fund these districts? And just by giving us the ability to do additional levies, then you're also discounting some districts who did not have the financial means to be able to do a levy. They may have more businesses in one community than in another community. Then you're putting the tax burden on the people who can afford it the least. So I think getting to neutrality, there needs to be a deeper dive as to, are we going to live up to our Constitution here in Minnesota of having a uniform system that can educate all children.
Wonderful, thank you. And as we leave this room and have time to review the report in detail, I would point out that it has a strong section on the need to find financial solutions to this equity issue.
Dr. Alexander did a great job. And as a part of that report, what I did like about the report, her piece about the financial and neutrality, but also what Dr. Khalifa did and talked about the cultural competence piece, because to do all the professional development that he spoke about, not just for teachers but administrators, you need funding to be able to do that, and more so because of the fact 94% of our teaching staff, they're white, 4% are people of color, and 33% of our students. The students stood up here and spoke about the psychology, the cultural differences. I said, that young man need to go write a report himself because he was spot on. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Jenkins, you alluded to some of the history that led to this system that doesn't serve all students. And this report also refers to it. It does a wonderful job, I think, of reframing how, and pointing out how after Brown v. Board, yes, African-American teachers were driven out of the profession.
Wow.
And closed out of education because integrated schools meant white parents didn't want to face a minority teacher for their student. Today, this report has reframed the issue from recruitment of teachers to an invitation to people to return to teaching and to create a hospitable environment for teachers. How do you take this report's response to recruitment and talent questions?
First of all, thank you for bringing that point out, because that was, in my estimation, a good start to illuminate that for our community of what happened historically. And the notion, when we started with Brown versus the Board of Education, there were some whites who didn't want their children being taught by African Americans, so they eliminated the African American teachers and administrators. And it was also very tough for board members to get elected during those times. Now, these are individuals who had just been deemed, and if you go back and look, I'm a history buff, at how African Americans have performed before they came to American. The African people have always been of the brightest people in the world. And then when we had segregated schools, you had high performance. You had, actually in the area of science and math, African Americans perform extremely well under the leadership of African American teachers, African American principals, African American board members. Once integration occurred, it was a concerted effort, which I must say to you, that's happening again right now as I speak, okay, to eliminate teachers of color, eliminate administrators, eliminate superintendents, and to close out board members. So when I think about the report and how it began to lay out and say we need to start recruiting, the recruiting must reflect the philosophy of the individual and of the children that you're trying to serve. And those children need to, and all the research is pointed out in your report that talks about an African-American child having one person of color increases their academic opportunities, the potential that they're going to even graduate. But it's not only good for the African-American child, it's good for all children. But I will say, it has to go forward because African-American teachers need to have leaders in the building to see from a career standpoint, I start here, but I can go to the next level. I want to go from a teacher to being a superintendent. And when I finish, I want to volunteer my time and be a board member. So that's what I would say. But some of the strategies specifically, I'm sorry, I would say in my 30-year career, I've worked inside and outside to build this capacity of understanding, recruiting individuals, looking at teacher licensures, what are they asking, particularly like in our state right now, as you look at the data which was reported out, that was real data in terms of getting people of color into the state on one level. So we have to also build bridges with historical black colleges and universities. I graduated myself from Mississippi Valley State University, a historical black college and university, which is a part of who I am right now and gives me another lens to complement my colleagues like Dr. Schultz.
Wonderful. So Dr. Schultz, as a colleague, how do you bring others along and how do you help recruit and retain Indigenous and teachers of color, and how would you suggest we need to change at the superintendent's level in managing this?
So I think that this question leads to probably the most important work we can do in schools today. It's also the most difficult, as Dr. Jenkins alluded to. I think the thing that I've done in addressing this is really making sure that I listen to understand what the experience is of a teacher of color coming into a school system, and listen to what the needs are for the system to welcome them and to create an environment for them to achieve and to build relationships with students. So I've looked for these partnerships in my career as a superintendent. I had the opportunity to meet a business leader who recruited business leaders from historically black colleges and universities. And as I was talking to him, I just asked him one day, well, if you can recruit leaders and business leaders, could you recruit teachers? And we set out to begin to call the historically black colleges and universities presidents to ask them, how can we recruit teachers to Minnesota? We have a problem in Minnesota. It's called snow and cold. That really is difficult for individuals to say from the south, I'm going to go to the cold north. And so we found that challenging, but I think it's important for superintendents to listen for those opportunities. There are some wonderful opportunities that are happening in, I know the University of Minnesota has teacher of color programs, Metro State, St. Thomas. I think school districts need to become engaged and active with teacher preparation programs to provide a place for individuals to train and support. So for example, can school districts hire the student teachers as paraprofessionals, and as they are student teaching, support them economically? I think that's been something I've learned, that we can help them as a school system to provide them that economic resource. I think the other part was, once we get them in, probably the most part is to provide community. In Edina, we have affinity groups for our staff of color, and I meet with them. Our other leadership meets with them, the district administrators, principals, listens to their concerns, addresses their concerns, and really gives me the opportunity as a leader to listen to them to continue to build that community. So I also want to applaud the state of Minnesota's pursuit of this work, to put some resource behind it, but a lot more has to be done in listening and having conversations.
If I may add one other point in there too. Actually, one, there's a reality that we have 4% staff of color. They're not all, I'm a foreigner, I'm from Alabama. And so the cold, I've been here for over 30 years in the Midwest. So it's not just the weather, but it's the level of, once we get them here, as my colleague said, forming other partnerships. And some of it, not just within the school systems, we must educate our community, illuminate what's also happening. The level of microaggression that happens here in the state of Minnesota, you probably figured it out. I'm not Minnesota nice, okay? But the level of microaggression is serious. And what I want to say, it happens to students. Then it turns around and happens to our teachers. Then it happens to the administrators, superintendents, to the board members. If we're serious as a community, we should be outraged when we see situations like East Carver and someone's trying to step up and do the right thing. You see Edina wrestling with things as a community to fight those wars in isolation. That's not right. See, we can't talk about justice and be okay with injustice.
That's right.
And I just say in Robbinsdale, we've made a commitment to move forward. It started way before I got there. Robbinsdale was at the beginning over 48 years ago with early childhood. Robbinsdale has been a changing community, and Robbinsdale School Board and community has stepped out and said, we're going to do some things, you know? And when it happens in Minnetonka, Anoka, as a community, as a state community, we have to stop allowing this to happen, a few individuals to run our good teachers, our good children, and our good families out of the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Michael, I know you want to add something.
Yeah, just to jump on that, because I really appreciate you pointing this out. We have all these great opportunities, and we have some of them at the University of Minnesota to essentially grow your own kind of effort, urban teacher programs with real strong partnerships with schools. And we hear, and I know personally from a close friend who changed careers and decided to give back and went to work in a school in her own community where she grew up and where she raised her daughter, and was questioned regularly with regard to whether or not she had a real teaching license, and the only reason she was hired is because of affirmative action, and within a year left the school, very sadly. Heartbroken, because her kids finally said, we love our teacher because she's one of us, she knows us, and she's from our community. We have a resource in our schools, I think, that is often perhaps overutilized in some respects, but underutilized in a way that it could really be helpful. And it's a resource in our schools that could really help us, our schools and communities, understand how to be learning organizations, because they are about helping us understand how to do our work. And these are the research, evaluation, and assessment directors our assessment coordinators in our schools. And I know we've got a number of them in the room, and I want you to stand up.
Yes.
Research, evaluation, and assessment staff. These folks are so dedicated, and they work so hard to help make sure that we know what we're doing in our schools and in our communities. And we really need to appreciate them. They help us be learning communities.
Thank you. So we have just a couple minutes left. This report talked about the power of bringing together cross-pollination, a broader view, bigger schools, statewide view, not just local. And today, we've brought together the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, the United Way, and the Minneapolis Foundation to say we're watching and we want to help. We have representatives of DEED, people from Itasca. We have board members who are leaders in our community. We have the Attorney General's office. We have a very remarkable group of people gathered to say we want to be a part. Think about this fact, right? Schools, less than 180 days a year, less than half a year, 6 hours a day, less than a quarter of a child's day. You add it all together, children spend about 8.7% of their life in school before age 18. They spend another third sleeping, 3% eating, occasionally bathing. A lot of schools do an incredible job with 8.7% of a child's life. We've got to have the wraparound. The rest of the community has to show up. Could I ask Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Schultz to just take a minute to reflect, and really just a minute, on how you've valued the cross-pollination that went into this report and what we should look for next?
Well, first of all, much appreciation for the time that the scholar practitioners at the university took to weigh in on the work. I look forward to engaging with them more to get a little bit deeper on the action plans, taking action, not just conversation. But I have really appreciated not only there with the university, that piece, but with my colleagues. It has been the greatest experience for me, having been a superintendent in another state. This doesn't happen, that you get this many superintendents stay together for this long on a topic that we know can be controversial, but we also know that it can be life-changing for the entire state. So my appreciation in reality comes in the fact that I know and believe in my 30 years and having my teacher training at Mississippi Valley State University, having taught phys ed, having coached and understanding Bandura's belief system and training model, that all individuals can too produce if given the right conditions. So in learning from my other colleagues what they're doing in their district and knowing that we need to take these strategies to the next level. We as a district in Robbinsdale have worked with our unions, because it's important to know that too. You have to work with your unions as partners and come up with a memorandum of understanding to retain our teachers with certain skill sets in our district, be it people of color or specialty skills. So I have really appreciated just working together with my colleagues, who I think are phenomenal. And as Dr. Tucci Osorio has said, we do fight. And you can probably imagine we have some intense discussions. You cannot go forward if you do not engage in intellectual exchange, and you don't have to agree, period.
Thank you. Dr. Schultz, any final reflection?
So I really echo what Dr. Jenkins said. I think this work is, when we started this work and I asked Paula the first question, and now it has been, this conversation has continued to the rest, to a broader audience. It's very rewarding. I want to thank everybody in this room for being part of this conversation. Thank all my colleagues. I want to thank all the school boards that wrestle with this. I still believe at this point in this work, we are still talking, we are still studying, but we still have students that are not connecting with what's happening in the classroom. And I think we need to begin to transform all this wonderful conversation, all these great ideas, and all the support into action. And want to continue to keep that as a focus.
Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez, you're good. Well then, I want to take a minute to say how much I appreciate your voice in moving us away from high-stakes testing, in which we seem to spend more time weighing our babies than we do feeding them, into testing which helps us inform the conversation and interaction with our students so that we can, as this report suggests, eliminate adult behaviors that lead to disproportionality, create culturally responsive and inclusive schools, elevate our students' voices, create a common vision for personalized education that measures how each student succeeds, not where they fail, invest in strategies to recruit and retain our teachers of color and Indigenous teachers, bridging schools, homes, and families. Education is a liberating force in human development. Once given, it cannot be taken away. It is one of the most powerful indicators of future success, and it is one of the greatest treasures that is transmitted intergenerationally, and we have failed in Minnesota to give that treasure and that power across generations. It is time for us to stop it now. This report tells us one way to start making that happen, and you, as our community, are the voices that will hold us responsible, accountable, and be the partners to make this vision a reality. I want to thank our panelists and thank our colleagues who are here today.